Welcome to Compliance Therapy with Igor Volovich, presented by Qmulos. Qmulos, converged continuous compliance. Get it together.
Well, welcome, Mark Whitteker from Cisco. I'll let you do your own introductions. Please tell us about yourself and your role, what you do at Cisco.
Sure. Mark Whitteker. I've been working at Cisco for about almost 23 years now, primarily focused in the government security space that entire time. Roles changed over the years from being a engineer to architect to manager, been in management for about 12, 13 years now. But my team is really focused on government IT security for Cisco, specifically around our engagements with US government and meeting both DoD and Intel organizations' requirements. And so I've got basically two teams, one team that focuses on our unclassified security, and that's really where Qmulos comes into play with the work that we're doing there with monitoring compliance and risk for our broader government programs. And then I have another team that does specifically around classified development for both internal teams for Cisco and for our government customers.
Sounds very interesting. So sounds like you've got a lot of different hats that you wear, and you've got your hands full with a lot of compliance tasks, right?
Yeah, definitely stay busy on a day-to-day basis.
So no discussion of government compliance can be complete. And for those who don't know, obviously, CMMC compliance is what we talk about. So is that really the focus of your efforts these days?
It is. We've been focused on CMMC probably for the last 2 to 3 years now. Since it was first announced, we've had our government environment since around 2006, been built to meet things like FISMA requirements, the NIST 800-171 requirements. So this is really just an evolution of that and continue to kind of build out that compliance program to ensure that we're meeting 100% of the requirements for the CMMC guidelines.
And so it sounds like you guys have been investing into this a lot earlier than a lot of the other folks out in the industry. We've had good conversations on this topic with folks in this space, like guys like Jacob Horn from Summit 7. We've done a couple of fireside chats with him, and I'm sure you're nodding your head enthusiastically when I say his name. He's a pretty prominent figure in the industry, and what he shared with us is a lot of the players in the industry kind of took a backseat, at least publicly, that's what they did. They took a backseat and said, well, we're going to wait till CMMC is fully defined, till it becomes really part of FARS, till it becomes ratified. And until then, we're just going to wait it out. And then they went home and actually went full bore trying to get themselves to a CMMC compliant state. And it's really become more of a positioning and a kind of a competitive positioning conversation internally with a lot of these companies, where they say one thing publicly, they say we're going to wait this out, and then they go home and really put a lot of efforts towards making this a real, truly investing into compliance, especially under CMMC. So it sounds like Cisco has definitely been investing in this for a while.
Definitely been investing for a while. In my opinion, if you haven't started your work on CMMC by now, you're way too late. You're not going to be ready by the time it rolls into contracts. Company like Cisco, very large company, we have 6,000 to 7,000 internal applications. So a lot of it for us is just really figuring out where that boundary is for CUI and FCI data within the company and ensuring that we contain that and meet the requirements specifically within that boundary. And that's where a lot of our conversation up to now has been, not only just with our enclave that we have, but where do we need to expand that out into other corporate services? And that's definitely not an easy conversation in a large international company.
Certainly. And, I remember back in the day when I was cutting my compliance teeth, almost 16, 17 years ago, when PCI DSS was a big novel thing. And again, very similar conversations about enclaves and what's the data flow look like? What's the data architecture? Whether these things live, how many applications are involved? And, you mentioned 7,000 internal applications, not uncommon, right? And, especially if folks are just waking up to this now. The reality is they're probably, like you said, way too late in the game, and their competitors are probably way ahead of them. So what's been one of the biggest challenges? So clearly, you're expanding the scope of where you think CUI might be, and you're trying to ensure that your compliance scope is adequate, right? Of course, mapping out the data flows, that's always a difficult thing, but also mapping out your controls. What's been challenging about that, and how have you guys approached it?
To be honest, from my perspective, I don't find the controls themselves the challenging piece. The controls are very straightforward, easy to understand. Applying them and understanding where to apply them, that is more of the challenge, especially with identifying where we actually have CUI and FCI data within the organization. it's probably no surprise to most people. It's a challenge making sure that the government is actually labeling that type of data correctly, not only with documents, but when we have a lot of our other systems, we start bringing in different pieces of information that either by themselves or in aggregate could be CUI as well. And so that's more of the challenge for us, is really figuring out where CUI exists within the organization, not just from documents coming in from the government, but things that we're generating or other types of systems where we have them engaged with us.
Interesting. So it sounds like, well, figuring out where to go is more important than the controls themselves. But also with the controls, what we found in the past, talking to a lot of different customers, and also being, a former system myself, I know the challenges that I faced is the consistency in how we apply these controls and figuring out where they stand. Of course, with CMMC's self-certification, self-assessment going away, right? And now actually having to deal with a third-party assessor, you really want to make sure that those implementation statements are correct, the controls are actually efficiently performing their function, and you don't really get a lot of play on that, right? It's a kind of a pass-fail type situation, right? You don't get gradations, you don't get some granular view into how much you failed or how much you've passed, right? You either pass or fail, and then if you fail, well, that's a problem, right? So from your perspective, how do you ensure that consistency? How do you ensure that when you're applying those controls to where CUI and FCI actually lives, once you've determined where that is, right? How do you ensure that there's that consistency? How do you know that the controls are actually put in place correctly, that they're functioning correctly, and also doing this on a continuous basis where it's not just, kind of fire and forget, then come back a year later and figure out where you stand? How do you make sure that you have that visibility to the control state?
Yeah, and that's where Qmulos really helps us. We're a big Splunk shop. All of our data is going into Splunk. And what I was really looking for was a solution where I'm not having to replicate that information elsewhere, pull it together from a lot of the separate sources and try to piece it together. We already have all this data going into Splunk. We have the visibility across all of our applications and systems. Layering Qmulos on top of that to give us that visibility into the dashboards. We have one shop place we can go, bring an auditor in, they do an assessment, and we can sit down with them and show them the dashboards. To me, that just makes it much simpler, and that helps to really collect all that information into one location that we're already leveraging.
So, of course, Cisco's been at the forefront of visibility and observability of data. Of course, Cisco collects an enormous amount of telemetry. Of course, all the data in the network goes through Cisco devices typically. And so you've got access to a lot of that metadata that you can make sense of, and you certainly make a lot of sense of it from a network performance perspective, network security perspective. Just, there's a lot of telemetry, just a matter of making sense of it all. So where did we plug in from the Qmulos side, and we're able to give you another dimension to that same data?
Do you suffer from seasonal compliance fatigue and chronic compliance headaches? You're not alone. Countless IT, compliance, and cybersecurity professionals just like you continue to suffer from legacy compliance, audit, and assessment workflows, excessive compliance paperwork, and manual evidence collection. Sadly, most have just accepted the idea that compliance management must always be difficult and unpleasant, but it doesn't have to be. Qmulos, an industry leader in converged continuous compliance, has developed revolutionary treatment options to relieve your compliance-related stress, delivering a fully automated end-to-end compliance experience. Don't delay. Call today for a free consultation with one of our compliance therapists and start your journey to converged continuous compliance by Qmulos. Call toll-free 1-844-476-8567 or visit Qmulos.com to start your healing journey. That's Qmulos.com. Qmulos, the compliance automation you need, the compliance experience you'll love.
So,
Compliance perspective.
Yeah, from our Enclave perspective, while we are part of Cisco, we don't just focus on Cisco systems within our environment. We have a lot of the separate systems. Again, this environment's existed since 2006. And so a lot of the products that Cisco has now did exist back then. And so it's really kind of amassed a lot of different technologies over the years. And so one thing I really appreciate with Qmulos is the fact that there's been a lot of work done with Cisco to make sure our products can integrate. You can bring the logs in very cleanly, get them tagged, and get them showing up in the dashboard very quickly. That's really what's helped us. And to be honest, that's been probably the easiest part of us getting Qmulos up and running with our dashboards. It's more some of the other non-Cisco products that we are having to go through and really tune and shape to make sure that they are being reflected accurately.
That's great to hear. Of course, we always love hearing that we made your life easier. And I wanted to talk to you about a concept that we've been kind of pioneering and evangelizing is the idea of a compliance experience, right? Improving the compliance experience. What we mean by that, not just the user experience of folks using the console, using the Qmulos products and dashboards, but really anybody that compliance lifecycle touches, right? Anybody from system owners all the way through the C-levels and the risk committees that consume that data, ultimately, hopefully, to make risk management decisions based on that compliance posture. What has your compliance experience been before Qmulos, and how have you seen it improve? Have you experienced better data flow, easier data flow, better data collection? How has automation changed the perspective on compliance across that entire lifecycle?
Well, I do have a fairly small engineering team. And so being able to leverage something that automates a lot of that collection reporting for us definitely makes their lives easier. Before leveraging Splunk and Qmulos layered over top of that, we're doing things like Excel spreadsheets, smart sheets, data collected in a lot of static locations that makes it very difficult to keep it updated and accurate. And so having a system like Splunk where the data is real time, really helps us with our ongoing compliance, where we can go in, check compliance, report on any point in time, especially with CMMC, because it's not a one and done sort of thing. It's ongoing compliance, being able to demonstrate our compliance at any point in time.
So that ability to actually do compliance in real time, this is a new capability that Cisco has enabled internally, correct?
It is, at least within the government space that I'm aware of.
Very interesting. So, I mean, that's exactly what Qmulos is built on, the idea of doing continuous compliance, where it's happening in real time because, well, guess what? All of these events are actually happening in real time. And I know it's a little different to think about than in the compliance space. We certainly accept that timeline, the real time and near real time timeline within security operations. And, we would never think about doing work in the SOC or in an NSOC or in a NOC with data from, 3 weeks ago, 3 months ago, or 3 years ago, which is very common in a compliance space. So clearly, it takes a bit of a mind shift, or probably a large mind shift, to kind of change the perspective on, well, compliance can actually be done in real time. So have you seen more of a convergence or more of a collaboration between kind of some of the operational components of your environment and the compliance, kind of the classic compliance function? Have they converged on that timeline, being more real time and being more collaborative?
Definitely become more collaborative. My team works very closely with our data center engineers. Not only does my security team leverage our Splunk instance, but they leverage it as well for a lot of the reporting for things like, troubleshooting, finding anomalies, looking for areas of, performing, bettering our performance in different areas. And so it's definitely become more collaborative. It's not just the security team going off and looking at settings and recording, here's what we think the current compliance is, but with that real-time approach, it definitely gives us that current visibility where it's not only just a compliance thing, but it really ties very closely into our operations.
Well, it's great to hear. I mean, I think that's, again, one of the values that we try to bring with Qmulos is the idea that compliance really allows you to leverage existing investments from a different perspective. You don't have to have a separate compliance function, a separate security function, a separate risk management function, a separate SOC operation. That in the end, data is data, telemetry is telemetry. You're collecting information about your environment, about the applications, about the infrastructure, and about the people and the processes they execute. So we already have that data in place. And of course, since you are a Splunk shop, as you pointed out, the data is actually now centralized and it's all converged. So it's just a matter of putting a different lens on it. And that's what we've done with our product. And of course, layering it on top of Splunk allows us to use all of the power of Splunk and the big data analytics. And I think Cisco, of course, has been at the forefront of that. Products like Cisco ICE, of course, kind of the early efforts to converge a lot of that data, bring it together, give you that observability and a better understanding of your environment, kind of visibility across the entire enterprise is the mantra. And I think having that extra lens certainly can be helpful. But I'm sure it wasn't without challenges. Folks kind of are set in their ways a lot of times, and especially compliance, that tends to be thought of as a retroactive, retrospective, purely historic audit type function. What have you guys done to really bring the organization together? And you mentioned collaboration has definitely improved. Have you done anything to really shift kind of the roles and the different organizational dynamics around compliance being really more integrated into security operations and into risk management activities?
So my security team, we've always worked very closely with our engineering partners. We really don't see security as a separate function because of the work we do with the government. It has to stay very integrated. But it has gotten to a point where it is more collaborative and more real time. So it's not just engineers coming up with questions. They get sent over to the security team to figure out and give answers and kind of go back and forth. We are being included now in project meetings and ongoing requirements discussions. And security is really becoming more integrated into the day-to-day operations. And so it's not really considered a separate function for us anymore. It's just part of our normal way that we do business.
Well, that's really great to hear, Mark. And I can't applaud you enough. That this is the kind of transformation that I've certainly been advocating for a long time. And I know Qmulos is part of our converged continuous compliance mantra. That's what we've been putting out there as well. And we're really glad to hear that this is something that Qmulos was able to maybe catalyze for you or help you bring around for your environment. So that's definitely that's value generation right there. And I'm happy to hear that. So can we maybe set the clock back a little bit? When you were originally looking at the marketplace and you had your set of requirements, what brought you to Qmulos? How did you find out about Qmulos? What did you think Qmulos really, how we set ourselves apart from the rest of the market?
So, we talked about the work we do around compliance and traditionally around things like spreadsheets and tracking data separately. What I was really looking for was a solution that integrated into our existing frameworks, something where we're able to access that data real time and can integrate into other systems. And it's not just a standalone product. And saw a demo that was being given internal to Cisco between Qmulos and some work that was being done with our federal sales team. Saw that, thought it was very interesting, and reached out to get a demo of it. And it just seemed like a great fit for our environment. As I mentioned, we're already a Splunk shop. A lot of work and focus going into Splunk, making sure that we're getting all the right logs into that system, and just being able to layer another product on top of that gives us what we need without having to stand up something completely separate. Was just kind of a no-brainer for us.
Well, it's great to hear. Well, we're very happy about the partnership, and we're certainly thrilled to continue to enhance your security and risk and compliance operations. And when we talk about kind of enhancing and delivering value, we also talk about kind of the overall program maturity. So not just enhancing the state of your controls and elevating your overall compliance posture, but really the maturity of the overall program, the ability to manage your controls, to manage your posture, to influence outcomes in a positive and more credible manner. I know, half of the equation in cybersecurity we don't control, right? We don't control how many times the bad guys attack us. That's not a useful metric to use. This is how many viruses we batted away in the last month. It doesn't really matter because we don't know how many of them came in, right? So all we can really do is try to control what's within our scope of influence, which is our own environment. And so when I look at a program, I try to think about the overall maturity. What is our ability to govern our environment? And, I'm curious if you thought about this, if this is how you look at your program, and where we have been able to help you understand more about your ability to govern your environment from a control perspective, security perspective, risk perspective.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the traditional maturity model, I'd say we're somewhere between level 3 defined and level 4 managed. Qmulos is definitely helping us to solidify that, give us the right visibility across the environment, being able to see the compliance reporting real time, very easy approach to getting access to that information. The real goal is that over time, once we are fully ramped up, we're CMMC compliant, then we can start moving more towards that level 4, level 5 optimizing, and continue to look for ways to improve our environment, not just track the current compliance of it. So we don't want to be just doing the minimal that's needed or doing compliance for the sake of compliance. We really want to make sure that we're operating the environment securely, but it's giving the results that the business needs to meet their requirements as well. And so the more that we can get that into that more optimized level, the better.
Well, that's fantastic. We're glad to be a part of the solution, not part of the problem. And of course, you identified a set of requirements that you had, and then of course, Qmulos is bringing to bear our solution. And we don't want to be just another part of the stack. And I know that's not where you guys are positioning us. We are really being a decisive differentiator in the way that you're running your program. We're creating specific answers to specific problems that you guys had. You identified those issues, the need for automation, the need for streamlining your entire compliance lifecycle. And I'm curious, are you seeing a reduction in risk incidents and deviations from your ideal security posture by using more streamlining, by using more automation, by kind of closing the loop on identified control failures faster? Are you seeing any benefits in that regard?
Definitely seeing benefits. I would say probably the biggest area where we're seeing those type of benefits is with the Q audit application. Q compliance really focused on getting the visibility in the environment and tracking compliance for us. But really from day one, when we rolled out Q audit, that started giving us a little bit more visibility and tying some of those events together easier than having the engineers having to do more analysis on their own. And so I think that over time has helped us to reduce the risk of the environment as well.
So I'm curious, when we talk about kind of the compliance lifecycle, right? A lot of it, as you mentioned, you've got engineers that are now sort of freed up to do real engineering, to actually do risk management work and architecture work, as opposed to just kind of shuffling data around and analyzing the control implementation statements, which is pretty tedious and it's necessary work. But again, something that could be automated. And of course, that's the way we approached it. Are you seeing your ability to shift towards more kind of higher level, more intensive engineering task, architecture tasks, real tasks of risk management, if you will, versus more administrative tasks like actually going and pulling data out of systems?
Yeah, and this has definitely helped us to get less work on analysis and trying to get visibility in the environment and really focusing on true incident response and risk reduction. Having tools in place that do a lot of that work for us gets that work off the engineers' plates and let them focus on the actual value that security is supposed to be bringing to the organization, where we are identifying areas that need to be addressed, incidences that take place within the environment, or just bringing down the overall risk for the space, because we do have that visibility and can really understand where we need to apply our efforts.
That's great to hear. So here's another question. So when we talk about portfolio management, right? A lot of CISO shops, security shops, they spend a lot of their time really not so much managing the risk or managing the security posture or managing even incidents. They're really managing the technology that's entrusted to them. And there tends to be a fairly myopic view, right, where we look at security technology doing security work versus just looking across the entire enterprise and saying, look, I don't necessarily care who paid for this technology. Does it have a security purpose? Does it have a security use? Can it be used to reduce our security risk and increase our security posture? And can we recognize these technology investments as a set of controls? And of course, we have security frameworks, we have compliance frameworks that help us do that, kind of organize our thinking around that. And a lot of folks tend to look at compliance that way. They say, well, I've got a couple of frameworks that I'm subject to. I'm just going to go ahead and do bare minimum. But they don't look at it as an opportunity to really understand their environment for a consistent model of risk management, right? That's what these frameworks really represent, right? They're built on known risk profiles. And when you look at NIST 800-171 or CMMC, we're talking about defending confidential and classified information and federal contract information, CUI and FCI. And these are good ideas, right? If we use them more proactively, not reactively, right? Don't use them as just kind of check the box compliance, the classic way compliance has been done, retroactive, retrospective, capture the past state. And it sounds like you're now able to actually capture your current state and maybe gain a better understanding of investments, technology investments, maybe even outside of your security realm specifically, but really across the entire IT space and the value that they have from the perspective of a control. Have you recognized that kind of a shift in thinking? Have you been able to understand your investments better from that perspective?
Yeah, as I mentioned, my security team, we're very closely integrated with our DevOps organization. And so we're not just looking at it from a security standpoint, what investment do we need to make in more security tools? It's really, overall, what is the business objective? What are we trying to deliver? Security is a component of that, but that is not the end goal for our organization. Is to deliver value to our customers. And so being able to find products like Qmulos that kind of help enhance the work that we're doing, we're not having to add additional applications. We're not having to spend more time standing up different tools and focusing on just trying to operate the tools. This does give us the ability to work more with the business, find out opportunities for us to help them be more successful as well. And as you mentioned, it's not always just a security solution, but sometimes security can help bring to light more of the needs within the business that may or may not be security related.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. Mark, thank you for coming on the program with us. Thank you for sharing your incredible insights. And of course, we're very happy to have a partnership with Cisco. I think there's a lot more to be done here. Of course, we're just beginning our relationship and we will continue to grow and enhance each other's offering to the marketplace. And I think what you guys are doing in the marketplace is incredible. Cisco continues to be a pace setter for the industry and a huge innovator. Of course, most of the world runs on Cisco, and that's not going away anytime soon. So we're very happy to be a part of that and to help you enhance and make more secure your offerings to the marketplace writ large. So thanks for being with us. And any final comments?
Appreciate the opportunity to speak today, and also just really appreciate the partnership that we have with Qmulos. It's been very beneficial for both myself and my security team. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you to all of us from Qmulos and Cisco for joining us.
Thank you.